Welcome to the Pittsford PTSA's Black History is American History interview with Maia Woluchem. I'm Alex Powell. I'm a co-liaison at Mendon High School for the Diversity and Inclusion Committee with two kids in the Pittsford School District. Now on to our featured guest. Maia is a technology fellow at the Ford Foundation. She has a master's degree in city planning from MIT, and prior to her work at MIT, Maia was a researcher at the Urban Institute, where she focused on how data and technology could democratize opportunity in support of social change. Maia also helped foster the National Neighborhood Indicators Partnership, a network working to advance the effective and equitable use of data across government, civil society groups, and academia. So, Maia, is there anything else you would want to add after that recitation of your experience? Anything I didn't cover?
No, you did a fantastic job. I would say the only thing I would add now that wasn't true when I started at Ford, but I think has been a really good theater to pull all of this together, is I started teaching a course with a friend of mine at NYU on segregation and race, which really sort of pulls together all of that really sort of important stuff about civil rights that animates so much of the work at Ford and throughout my life. So I'm grateful for that too.
Absolutely. So we were speaking before, and I said, given your academic focus and the way your career has progressed from urban planning more into civil rights with this focus on technology, it sounds so fascinating. Before we dig into some other issues, what is something that you have established or discovered with your work that people might be surprised or especially interested to know?
Yeah, that's a great question. Wow. So yeah, I actually got into technology in general because it felt like, so much of how we interact with each other now is animated by technology. Social media is really huge. We use data, big data, machine learning, algorithms, all of these things to reinforce just natural things that we would naturally be doing with one another anyway, regardless of whether tech was a thing or not. So I think something that's really interesting about this work is that I feel like, if anything, tech just accelerates our national or our natural societal progress in good ways and in bad. And so I think some of the more exciting things that have been a part of this work right now is because, we're in a time of really incredible transition, whether it's, transitioning between administrations, thinking about civil rights and our society in new ways. So the things that I've been most proud of recently are trying to think about, as this new administration comes together, what are going to be new policies that we're thinking about when it comes to data and tech that can reinforce some of the positive change that we want to see in the world. So that those things are things that I'm really excited to be a part of and give me a lot of hope for what is possible for the future. So
is there an example of a policy that, based on your experience, you really hope the new administration enacts?
Yeah. Oh gosh. So there's one that I'm working on right now. Is there was recently an executive order related to racial equity that's intended to get many of the agencies of the federal government to think about how they're doing policies and programs, and specifically think about how they affect folks of different backgrounds, because not all policy hits folks in the same way. So on the data and tech side, there is a slew of policy. There are a slew of policies that are related to how we collect data and evidence in support of this work on racial equity. And a group of other foundations and I are trying to be really creative about how we can make sure that policy really pushes us as far as we can go to make sure that we have all the sorts of evidence that we need to be able to say, like, yes, these things that we're actually trying to do in the world are really going to improve racial equity over time. That sounds really boring, but what it might mean in the long term is that hopefully we'll end up in a world where, we might not see, we might have some, idea that something like COVID affects communities of color much worse. We might know that earlier and be able to do something about it in a way that actually, helps people in the longevity of their lives. So that's our hope.
It sounds like, if I were to restate it, that you're talking about not just making sure that people are looking at the data, but considering how the data itself is gathered so that it's helpful.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly right. We're also trying to make sure that civil rights groups that have been part of advocacy in a bunch of spaces for a long time are also part of this decision-making process. We're trying to figure out, what's data that we actually need? Like, what are questions that we should be asking? Are there things that, we're not seeing that we should be seeing? So we're trying to really like put these disparate groups in the same room together so that hopefully we can build something that looks better for our future. That's our hope, at least.
Yeah, make change happen. Great. So as this is Black History Month, what we wanted to ask you is, who are some of the Black Americans from the past or present that inspired you and why?
Yeah. Gosh. Well, I get a lot of inspiration from the folks who were the record keepers throughout time. I think we have a lot of amazing heroes, and Martin Luther King and Thurgood Marshall, and folks that have been really doing like incredible monumental work over time. But I also feel like the folks who've been able to record this so that we have it for future generations are so important to our collective history and our ability to name change. I think of folks like James Baldwin. I think of folks like W.E.B. Du Bois, even Ida B. Wells, who really, I think we're writing about kind of radical ideas at the time, but I use in class all the time to sort of show that things that are happening right now were happening, 50, 100 years ago, and they might have looked differently, but we can look to these people to kind of give us a real sense of the ways the world has changed, the way the way the world is the same, and what we can also be striving for. So I am very grateful to those folks who I think at the time were a very small group of folks who were really trying to speak truth to power. And I think I'm grateful for their legacy. It's worked.
Well, I love those names because not only can we learn about them, but we can actually read their writings, right? You don't have to just learn about, Ida B. Wells and James Baldwin. You can actually read what they themselves thought. So those are some great references. Were there any teachers or mentors? Since this audience is likely to be mostly high school students, were there any teachers or mentors that supported your development when you were in high school?
Absolutely. Oh my goodness. I have a few to think, but the first one that comes to mind is Miss Basil, who was my English teacher when I was a senior at Sutherland. I have her to thank in so many ways, but she was my teacher right when Barack Obama was inaugurated and elected, but also inaugurated. And I think she was the first person to really open up even just the smallest bit of space to understand that, I think for so much of my life, I'd assumed that sort of, success was like an individual project. So the fact that Barack Obama was president now is like a testament to who he is as an individual. That much can be true. But I think so many of the stories that we tell about history are related to that individual person and not necessarily all of the other things that were happening when they were around. And I appreciate Miss Basil so much for giving me even just the smallest window to understand that, Obama is exceptional for a lot of reasons, not just because of who he is, but also because of all of this messy stuff that we've all had to live through. I never had a window into any of that, and it provided me such, even just the smallest opportunity to reconsider history and reconsider my place in it. And I think that really inspired me to work on the civil rights issues that I work on now, because she was the first person to really elevate for me that like, oh, the work it's ongoing. It's not been finished yet. So many of the things that, James Baldwin was writing about and W.E.B. Du Bois were writing about, those projects haven't been completed and there's still a lot of work to be done. So I think that we can, look at this moment and be really excited about it. And we can want for more. And I think that was really, to me at the time, it was the first time I'd ever heard anything like that before. And And I think back to her all the time because I just imagine that she lit many sort of like brains on fire through her teaching and just through who she was. And she made me feel really seen and understood in a way that I didn't know that I ever needed and I wouldn't have known how to ask for. And I just am so grateful for her all the time. I'm going to get like weepy about it. I'm really grateful for her because I know all of the ways that she really did absolutely change my life. And I'm sure if not for her, I would be a very unhappy, like, I don't know, engineer somewhere. Like, I don't think that I would have found myself to the work I'm doing now. So I'm very grateful for her.
Wow, what a story. That's fabulous. All right. So then what advice do you have for students, especially students of color that are interested in going into technology, for example?
Yeah. Gosh, I would say, I think when I was a high school student at Sutherland in particular, I feel like what I imagined success to be was like straight A's, doing all the right things, and going as far as I can in a particular field, and such that I could sort of like put things on my resume and feel really proud of those things. I don't think that I had a lot of creativity or political imagination or any sort of imagination about other lanes other than just do the best that you can at all of those things. And I think, yeah, Miss Basil opened up a little bit of space for me. And then I went to college and I just was exposed to so many new ideas that really got me to reconsider what success looked like, both for myself and for my family and my community. I think I got to think, I was much more open. I have been much more open over the past like 10, 15 years to thinking about life outside of myself. The things that I care about now are so much bigger and so much grander, but that also took a little bit of work to sort of lean into. I wasn't ready to lean into it when I was a freshman in high school. I sort of thought like the thing that I need to care about is doing very well in school. I still did very well in school. That's not to say like don't think about those things, but I think that openness and like openness to accept new ideas, openness to try new things, that's the advice that I would give. I think that, yeah, I was very narrow in my thinking. And then I grew up and I tried so many more things and still found my way to grad school. My parents are still very shocked, but it happened. I tried a bunch of new things and it made me really happy. And I think, you know, the upbringing and the sort of preparation that you get from Pittsburgh schools really does set you up to sail in many ways. So I would trust that. I think you're not going to fall very far if you fall at all. So I think there's just a real opportunity that Pittsburgh grads have to just try new things and lean into them. And it may feel uncomfortable, but we're also young and you have a lot of time to fix it if something goes wrong, which is not likely. So it's fine. Try it. It's going to be great.
Got it. So you were very focused. You thought success kind of fell within this academic realm. Is there anything you would have done differently if you had high school? I know part of it is the journey, right? Is there anything you would have done differently if you had the knowledge you have now when you were in high school?
Yeah. Oh, wow. I think, do you know, it's been so instructive to me. I found my old, I imagine that this is not a thing anymore, but the equivalent might be like a Tumblr or a diary of some kind. When I was in middle school and early high school, had a live journal, which I know makes me very old now, but it was like sort of a virtual journal that you can put all of your things into. And I found what I had written when I was like 12, 13, which was like, you know, I took a trip to DC and I thought like, wow, what I want to do someday is like go live in DC, work at some think tank, like make cool policies and do awesome things. And then I want to move to New York and like, you know, live in some cool loft somewhere and like be edgy or whatever. Like I just had things that I thought were going to happen in the world. But then I went to school and I was pre-med because I thought that was the thing that I was supposed to do. I learned very quickly because I have a very delicate constitution. They would hand me an eyeball and I would immediately like pass out and hit the ground. I was too sensitive and too sort of anxious to and I think that I knew those things, but I was really afraid to acknowledge a path that maybe was less clear. I felt like medical school is very clear. You just go and you do all the things and you leave and you're a surgeon and it's fine. But I think the world of sort of social science and social change is I, at the time, thought like, what is the job that I'm going to have at the end of this? Or like, where is even a place that I could work? Or like, what would I even be doing after? Like, I knew the things that I was interested in, but I couldn't name what the finale looked like. And that was too scary to me. But what I've learned throughout time is that, you know, I think that idea of like, oh God, I just want to like have A's and be excellent at things, like that translates to a bunch of other spaces. You need not put yourself in a box in order to do that. When I went to college, I changed my major a trillion times, ended up like sort of crash landed in econ. And it was because I had professors that were pushing me to think about the economics of development and the economics of like urban change and housing and inequality. And I didn't know that you could think about those things with like a very mathematical lens. I then went to school for urban planning, which was like not the job that I ever thought that I was going to have and not a job that I ever knew was out there, but it was one expression of the things that I cared about really deeply. I worked in policy, which I also thought like, what is that? Is that a job that ever existed? I didn't know, but it was like one expression of the things that I cared about really deeply and one way that I could put that out into the world. So I think, yeah, I feel like in high school, we sort of fit the problem backwards in a sense. At least me in high school as a senior, I was like, I have to get a job. But I'm the first, my parents are immigrants, and I'm their first kid. And so I feel like I had a real, I was very anxious about like making sure that, you know, I didn't let them down, that I, you know, was doing all of the right things. And I think you can do all of the right things in whatever lane you end up in. It need not be, you know, Nigerians always joke that you have to be like a doctor, lawyer, or an engineer, or you've just like, or you're a disappointment. Like those things can be true. But I think my family's been pretty they don't understand what I do at all, but they're like very excited that like, you know, I have a title and I went to grad school and like those things have been like, you know, that's made them happy. So I feel like, yeah, I would say don't get too bogged down. If I could tell my high school self anything, I think that it is to lean into the things that give you a real like fire and a passion for the work that you do. Because I've never been in a job yet that I've ever thought I wouldn't wake up and want to do this anyway. And that has been such a gift. I didn't recognize how much that of a gift that was until, you know, 10, 15 years after I graduated high school. And I feel really proud to be able to say that I'm still really excited to get up and like answer the questions and like think about things and think about questions in different ways. And I know that would not be the case if I had woken up and chosen to be an anesthesiologist. I know that would not be my life. So I'm very grateful for that. I still am able, like, you know, things come together, and that is a real gift. So yeah, that's what I would tell my high school self. I actually don't know that I would believe if my high school self and I were having a conversation, I'm not sure that I would believe my older self, but it's true, I promise.
And you got there, right? You got there. That's part of the journey. So you found a way to really marry your passions, but also your, you know, wanting to achieve all together without needing achievement to look like a certain thing.
Yeah, it's true. Because I do think too, achievement was very much at my own peril. I recognize all of the ways in which that was so, I think also a function of being, you know, a young woman of color, that I think that I was very afraid for a long time of, you know, I think that I internalized so much of what it means to be a person of color in space, or what folks view you as, that I think that I, at my own peril, was, you know, oh my gosh, the best way to combat those things is to be, you know, the most like hyper vigilant academic person in the world. And I don't think that that was ever the truest expression of who I am as a person. The things that give me excitement are, you know, finding things that I'm passionate about and leaning into them. And I think that the joy of getting older is that you recognize so much of I think that so much of my high school life was in service of the folks around me, that I really just wanted to feel like I wasn't doing the wrong thing, or like that, you know, I was not different from my peers. And I think, oh man, I'm so grateful that I think some of that has been shed over time. Because I think now, I wonder who I would have been in high school if I hadn't had the orientation that I have now, which is just like, be honest and truthful to the things that make you happy. And you need not be so concerned with the opinions of the folks around you, because you are so special. Like, whatever you're doing, it's really important to recognize that. So yeah, I mean, I think so much. Yeah, I mean, it's true. So much of who I was at the time was because I was just very afraid of what people thought of me. And that is really sad in retrospect, but it's the truth.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that. I think that the advice is wonderful for all high schoolers, but especially, you know, for those high schoolers of color that we have in our district, to consider outside influences versus who they are and what they want. So thank you so much for joining us today for this interview. Lovely to get to know you a little bit more. And we hope that this message gets to Mrs. Basil, who had such an impact on you.
Yeah, she's the very best. I did write her a long Facebook note. She knows.
Well, good to hear. All right. Well, lovely. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.